Good afternoon, everybody. Anybody who's still back there eating, you should probably, I don't know, you may want to stay there, but we'll see how it goes today. As Laura said, I'm Ezra Kucharz. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces. I just left CBS about 30 days ago. And in the last month, I've spent a lot of time with brands, media companies, platforms to kind of look at what are the things they are looking for or working on related to local. And I'm going to talk about one of those topics today, and it's data. And you know, I wanted to start off and talk a little bit about the first two industrial revolutions, right? I know somebody earlier tried to make a history reference related to dogs and bots. I promise I won't be doing that today. I'm going to touch on the Industrial Revolution for a second and say, when you look at the first Industrial Revolution, in the late, 18th century, it was based on the steam engine, right, or at the turn of the 19th century. When you come, another 40 years later, it was based on electricity. And you had incredible growths in industry around the world based on these two inventions. Now, many of you and I used to think that we were in the middle of another industrial revolution related to something I like to call glowing rectangles, right? Everybody has a cell phone in their pocket, everybody watches TV in their home, and you think about this thing as, okay, there's a revolution because people have these devices now that I can communicate them with them. But the problem with it is everybody's been fixated or focused on these glowing rectangles and not the world around them. So it really hasn't been a boom for the rest of the marketplace. If you own a local restaurant, if you own a car dealership, it's only the last year or so, maybe 2 years, that you've started to kind of see benefits from mobile devices. And what I would argue is we're at the beginning of another industrial revolution. But before we get there, does anybody not think we are living in an at-home and on-demand world? Anybody? No, right? The world is changing to this, right? Whether it's your media consumption, the way you want to have food delivered to your home, all the different types of ways that you can experience things seem to be heading to your household, right? That's both good and bad. So data is the glue that's going to kind of keep this all together. And when you think about it, we're entering this third industrial revolution where data is powering everything out in the real world. Tech-enabled services are going to be one of the most important things in all of our lives. I look at my suburban town that I live in, and I'm not saying I'm the key demographic, but even all the local restaurants, all the local services in my town, whether it's the plumber or electrician, everybody's got an app now. Everybody's kind of trying to use different tools like social media and email to communicate with their consumers. So we're entering this third industrial revolution. Some would say we maybe have been there for the last year or so. And most of the people in the room here are vendors or people that supply in the local marketplace. You have to really think about kind of the world we're about to enter. And data is the glue and fuel of everything that's going to happen now. These tech-enabled services that you will kind of help support are only going to work if that data is there. And you could say it's like the steam engine or electricity from the last two industrial revolutions. This is all driven by data. And when I ask people what data looks like, this is what I usually hear from people. Well, this is the data I have around my business. It could be passwords, it could be ones or zeros. But you also have to start thinking about things like this. Facial recognition, right? There are a couple companies in the sports space that are using facial recognition at stadiums to recognize audiences as they walk in the stadium. There are a few other companies that are building automated cars. This is what their data looks like, right? What's a person, what's a car, what's a hard object that I really probably shouldn't drive into? Other companies are listening to audio, right? Your Amazon Echo, your Google Home are always listening, and that's data. Now, they're not aggregating that data right now, but others may be able to through apps and other devices. And finally, when you think about all this data, it's interconnected. And when I've been out talking to a lot of brands and media companies, over the last few months, everybody says data looks like something different. It's whatever is key to their company or their organization. And what it comes down to, and I swiped this from the folks at IDC, hopefully they don't mind, is when you look at the data ecosystem, this is kind of where the four major buckets, everybody that's working in it, kind of fall into. You have the data creation piece, like how are you acquiring data? What are you, where's it coming from? The data acquisition piece is what are the technologies are you using to gather that technology? Are you using Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, first-party data, third-party data? What are you doing to create insights around that data? And this is one of the most important pieces. Data for the sake of data isn't going to work. I can't tell you how many companies and businesses I've had discussions with where they say, we've got a lot of data, right? It's in 7 different systems, none of them talk to each other. And then business processes, how can you take that data and plug it into other things you're doing? What I'd also ask you to think about is what is the value of data? Is some data worth more than others? And the example I'd love to give you here today is almost everybody in this room is collecting data through their business. And almost all of you are using that data to target the same 3 or 4 platforms, right? Social media, search sometimes, display, all those type of things. So if you're all collecting the same data on the same people from your different technologies and then supplying it to the same 3 or 4 groups, what do you call that? You call that a commodity, right? And ultimately, that doesn't end well for anybody except the people that are aggregating it on the other end. So some data is worth more, and you need to make your data more valuable, and it tends to happen via insights and algorithms. Another way to think about data is, I think everybody's heard about the malware attacks of the last kind of 4 to 6 months where people's systems are hijacked and they're asked to provide a credit card number to release their data. Your data's worth a lot at that point. Some people have been reported as spending $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on a credit card to try to get their data unlocked on their machine. So you have to think about, all right, I'm gathering all this data, but what does it mean? And now what? Okay, most of you are aggregating data or collecting data. How do you monetize it? What are you doing to actually make money or make money for your partners on that data? And like I said earlier, most of you are using it to target on the same 4 or 5 platforms. Now, in the case of broadcast and radio, you have mass reach. In the case of web, mobile, and social, you're able to reinforce messaging that you may deliver via broadcast. When you have events, mail, and even companies that have canvassed, you have the touch of the consumer. And then finally, emails and phone calls to convert. But once again, you're using all those platforms really to communicate on the same 4 to 5 or 3 or 4 platforms that everybody else is communicating with. And the real opportunity, and where I'm going to spend like 2 minutes and then we'll clear out of here to get us back on schedule, is shouldn't it happen the other way around? Shouldn't you be gathering this data from these platforms, whether it's social media, mobile, OTT, even traditional media, to push out to here? There are great companies popping up that are using this data to drive transactions, to drive business in the concert business, in the sports business, in restaurants, groceries, factories knowing what to produce based on the data they're aggregating. And I urge you all that this tech-enabled world, or this tech-enabled services world that we're all kind of at the beginning of, is really an opportunity to go out and kind of capitalize or generate some revenue. If you're going to fight with everybody else in this room to try to target ads on social media and through display advertising or video advertising, you're fighting with everybody here in this room. The companies that are using data to deliver monetization opportunities in those locations are the ones that are going to win. The key piece, and a couple people have touched on this earlier today, so I won't spend a ton of time on this, is the mobile device is the key piece to acquiring and delivering in all these locations. There's a great company that I advise out of Nashville that is in the concert business, where they're wearing devices at concerts and festivals, and they're aggregating data based on concert and festival goers and able to deliver messages to your phone based on the wearable. These are the type of businesses you're going to see popping up here in the next couple of years, and I urge you to figure out ways to support. I'm going to finish up really quickly here and just really touch on one thing. Has anybody seen Otto the truck before? Anybody know what this is about? Okay. So Otto was a project that Anheuser-Busch did, I think, with Uber in October of last year. This truck drove 120 miles without anybody behind the wheel to deliver beer, right? There was somebody in the cab. They got the truck out on the highway and they jumped into the passenger seat and just sat there for the 120 miles. Does anybody in this room not think autonomous vehicles are happening and are going to be part of the real world that we're going to live in? Okay. It's funny, when I go talk to media companies, and I've done a couple of these conversations, usually about half the audience raises their hands and says, well, autonomous vehicles are kind of, neat and they'll happen, but it's not going to be for 20, 30 years from now. So the Department of Labor estimates, I think by 2020, close to 3.8 million people will be out of work who drive, right? Truck drivers, taxi drivers, limo drivers, bus drivers, etc. What are they doing today to prepare for job retraining? Or to think about, how are there things I can do related to my work that are going to allow me to kind of continue to be employed? Or by 2020, are we going to have the kind of hysteria that the robots stole my job, right? So the point I want to make here is, this is all driven by data. And you're going to see more and more of these things out in the marketplace where data is going to drive things that are going to eliminate the human as part of the ecosystem. And what I would say to you is, try to do everything you can to make sure the projects you're working on are helping tech-enabled services and things that are out in the real world. Don't focus just on glowing rectangles. And with that, I think I finished on time. Thank you.